will be known today by the name of Abdullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Abdullah, how are you today?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good on yourself, Mushtaq.
Alhamdulillah. So Abdullah, just before even we talk about Spinney Hill, I just want to find out a little bit about yourself. So for those of our listeners who don't know about our organization, Spinney Hill Drugs, Alcohol and Addiction Support is an organization that's been set up over the last number of years, few years, about 4 or 5 years, to address the growing number of brothers and sisters within our community who have developed an addiction to drugs and or alcohol. So just to give a little bit of context before I bring in Brother Abdullah, we, myself and some other brothers, we were members of the community. We observed firsthand that there was a growing number of people developing addiction. And what we realized was, whereas in the past, a lot of our young people and a lot of people from the community were using Class B and cannabis, etc., there was a real change in the type of drugs that were being used. So there was more and more people who had started to drink alcohol, and more of our brothers and sisters were beginning to use Class A drugs, so right. Cocaine, heroin, etc. And what we found is that, as community workers, we didn't really have the experience or the life skills or the lived experience whereby we could support these people, with these brothers and sisters, in an effective manner. So what we began to do was to refer to existing statutory organizations that had been commissioned to work with people with these issues. Unfortunately, what happened was that the feedback that we began to get was that the services that were already prevalent, which were already existing, were not meeting the needs of our community. So they weren't meeting them socially, they weren't meeting them culturally, they weren't meeting them religiously. So they were coming back a little bit despondent and a bit unsure where to go from here. So that kind of led us on a journey to set up our own locality-based, community, culturally sensitive organization to support people who have developed addictions. And we started off with a small room. We moved to a premises on Evington Road, and recently we've just moved to a bigger premises that can help us fulfill our vision long term. It's all voluntary, apart from one 0.6 worker. Everybody else is given their time voluntarily. Just to put it in a bit of context in terms of the need, Turning Point, who is, like I mentioned, the commissioned service, they worked with one person from the BME community in the whole year. And since we've been operating, which has been on a shoestring budget, we've worked with over 100 people, men and women, young people, old people, professionals from all walks of life. And one of the things is that, as a result of the project, a lot of brothers and a lot of sisters have either completely stopped using, or they've reduced the amount of how much they consume drugs and alcohol. And not only this, but a lot of them have now found employment. They've reconciled with their partners. Some of them had fallen out with their families, and they're now on talking terms, and a lot of them have reconnected with their faith as well, which has been really positive. What I'd like to do now for the listeners is I'd just like to bring Brother Abdullah in. That's, for obvious reasons, it's not his real name. And Abdullah was one of our service users, and he's now also volunteering with the project. But I think it'll be interesting for myself and also for the listeners just to understand the journey that Abdullah's been on, his family background, what brought him into the life of addiction, and how he managed to change and pull himself out of that. So, Abdullah, just want to welcome you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on the show.
No, really appreciate it. I think it's really useful to have somebody to speak from an experienced perspective. So Abdullah, tell me a little bit about yourself in terms of your childhood. First of all, where you grew up. Whereabouts in Leicester are you from?
So I'm from the Highfields area of Leicester. The Highfields area has been known for a long time for a high rate of crime, deprivation, drugs, drug dealing, violence, prostitution, all those kind of things. So growing up, my family's from a well-respected family, not the most well-off, but they worked very hard, tried to raise us the best way they could. But trying to fit into the peer pressure from other areas of community with a bit more well-off, obviously we had to try and make money or try fit in from criminal activities. So that could be robbery, stealing.
So, Abdullah, sorry to interrupt. So what kind of age group or what kind of age were you when you maybe started to indulge in some of these activities?
The criminal activities, you mean?
Yeah.
About 10, 11 years old, probably.
Right, so quite young then.
Really young, yeah. So me, my brother, my cousin, we used to Skype weekend school, and we do go into the city centre, go to New York Museum. We start shoplifting, high value items. Back then, I'm talking this about 25 years ago now, so it's quite a while back.
So quite early on.
Yeah.
And was it mainly because of the lack of finances at home?
It was mainly the lack of finances, the lack of freedom at home, the pressures from family to do successfully with the academic route of life.
Yeah. And then did that then escalate?
That did escalate. So what happened as we were growing up, so from the transition from primary school to secondary school was I wouldn't say the primary catalyst, but as we go into primary school, obviously, young people go to puberty.
Yeah.
They want to experiment with certain things. So that's where alcohol comes in. That's where cannabis comes in. There wasn't so much A-class drugs at that time. So I'm talking in the late 90s, early 2000s. But saying that, as in growing up in Highfields, we were exposed to, or we saw the kind of activities that are going on in the area.
Right.
And that was, like I said, a lot of people that have grown up in the Highfields area, they know it's from the 80s, 90s. It's always been quite prevalent.
Yeah. So you started this kind of criminal career, if I can call it that, from about the age of 11.
Yeah.
Then just like all, like the challenges that a lot of young boys go through, going through puberty, growing up with a family in a city area. And then you said that it kind of escalated when you went to secondary school.
That's right, yeah. So
what was it about secondary school? Was it meeting different people? Was it
so in secondary school, obviously, there's a lot more students, a lot more people of different areas. And like I said, when all the communities come together, some families, some students are more well off. They had more fancy things in life, whether it's trainers, tracksuits, school, whatever it could be, school uniforms. Back then, mobile phones didn't. I don't really think it existed back then. But then, there's a birth of pages and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Electronics when the PlayStation first came out.
Yeah.
So that was I think it was 1998. I think it was. So obviously we didn't have PlayStation. I didn't get a games console until I was about probably 14 years old. I think it was. So.
Yeah. So it was that kind of comparison. Seeing people who had things. Yeah. And then looking at your own life and seeing you didn't have. Yeah. When I say you didn't have things, you didn't have the material things.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, and then what did that lead to then?
So what happened is a family member of mine, he was quite heavily involved in the drug dealing scene in Leicester. He was quite well known.
Okay.
And I used to see him always in nice flashy cars, flashy clothes.
Yeah.
He had a lot of respect and street credibility from a lot of the people in the area.
So as well as the material things that we talked about, how important was respect, credibility? How important was that a factor as a draw to that life?
Growing up in Highfield, it mattered quite a lot to a lot of the people there. So too well known, too well respected. Some would even be scared. Just to have so-called that so-called gangster status, if you call it that.
Yeah. Okay, and then how did that progress? And so you had this cousin of yours who was
he was an uncle of mine, yeah.
Okay, who was already in that scene.
He was already in that lifestyle, yeah. And like I said, he was back then. I'm talking, the Mark Morrison days. If anyone knows who that is, he was driving Range.
Return of the Mac.
That's right, yeah. So he was, driving Range Rovers. He had the Rolex watches.
Wow.
He had the trainers. He had the clothes, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it was very appealing.
Yeah, of course.
Because, like I said, he didn't seem to have no apparent job. People, everyone, he walked down the street, everyone would say hello to him. Everyone would go out the way and this, that, whatnot.
Was there any other role models around that you could have looked up to who were doing well, but maybe through more legitimate means? Or would you say there was a distinct lack of role models for you growing up?
Back then, we didn't have any role models in our direct influence in our lives. So my role models when I was growing up with people like, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson.
Right.
All like movie stars and martial arts and sports people. Other than that, there wasn't really many role models in terms of having a direct influence I have come to direct contact with.
No. So then, what was the next step for you after that? Did your uncle invite you to that world, or did you ask him?
He didn't invite me. I somehow wormed my way in. So I was at his house one time, and I managed to see what he was selling. Obviously, at that time, there was a bit of cannabis at that time. Yeah. I know he was doing other things, but obviously at that time I was none the wiser, so I didn't know exactly. Right. So I must have taken some items without permission. And took it to school, and I told my friend, look what I've got. Yeah. So, and obviously that's when it all started. And I always said to myself that I'll sell drugs, but I'll never take drugs myself. Right. But then obviously the opposite happened. Karma hit back.
Yeah. Don't get high on your own supply. Yeah, exactly. Famous line, but it's hard to do that then.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So you were growing up. Yeah. You wanted respect. You wanted material things, which a lot of young people do. Started off by selling drugs. Yeah. What then switched or changed for you from supplying to then consuming yourself? Was it just because it was so readily available to you?
I think because the peer pressure, to be honest. Everyone around me was doing it.
Right.
If you didn't do it, you weren't normal. And like I said, first it started off with cigarettes. So I must have smoked my first cigarette when I was about 8, 9 years old. And those were the ones you get from back home. Yeah. Like wrapped up in the beef. Beedi, yeah. So it starts off with that, because obviously we could get that easily accessible from the Asian shops. Then obviously an uncle of mine that was a similar age to me, he used to come from out of town. Yeah. And obviously we had a very close bond, so we started smoking together when he used to come, but obviously we couldn't access it as easily as possible. And obviously we couldn't go home smelling of cigarettes or get caught with like a box of cigarettes or a lighter or anything, or we get beaten up by our parents and the rest of the family.
Was anybody aware of what was happening to you at this time, what you were going through, what you were involved in?
Not really, as in the signs started coming out a bit later. So when I was in, I think, year 8 or year 9, so I was about 13 or 14 years old. Right. I think that's when the signs, and looking back on myself and reflecting, I could see the signs myself of, some of the signs, not always, particularly going to be, what you suspect. Yeah. But generally, they are telltale signs that, someone's going on a path of.
Okay, so if there's any parents listening now, what kind of things would you say are things that they should be looking out for from what the signs that you were displaying which were missed? What would you say that is things that parents should be looking out for?
So the two perspectives are basically, so if either someone's selling drugs or someone's taking drugs, two completely different things, but they both overlap. Yeah. So if someone's taking drugs, then, or even alcohol, for example, the smell of it when they come home, or the behavior changes, the responsiveness changes, the relationship with family members changes, things might start going missing in the house. Not always, but like I said, sometimes it might be for a different reason. Yeah. But generally, they are telltale signs. Paraphernalia, where there's rolling papers, lighters. Like I said, it always starts off with something innocent like cigarettes. Right. And
would you say that's the gateway drug then?
I wouldn't say it's the gateway drug itself, but I think it opens up the mind.
Yeah.
Like coming from an Asian background and a Muslim background, generally smoking at a young age is obviously looked down upon. Yeah.
And how important was your faith at that stage? Were you practicing at all? Did you go to madrasa?
I was at madrasa at the time, yeah.
Okay. So did you have any consciousness in terms of your faith at that stage, or was it just something that wasn't really at the forefront of your mind?
It wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I was too young, but I was too naive and young.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how did your life kind of deteriorate from that point onwards?
So I used to hang around with a group of friends, smoke weed on a regular basis, selling weed on a regular basis, and then obviously my academic studies suffered while I was at school. So I was, very intelligent, very bright, predicted all A's and B's. But because I didn't want to pay no attention to my studies, I was more focused on being on the streets.
Right.
And obviously, getting that street reputation, credibility, that gangster status, I started focusing more on that, start rebelling against authority, rebelling against my parents. I'd always be respectful, but then it came to a point where I started being disrespectful for people I didn't like. And obviously with all the reputation comes all the fighting. I wouldn't say gang life as such, but the emergence of gang life at that time, like I said, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So like I said, finished school. Alhamdulillah, grades were all right, not too bad.
So you managed to maintain, some academic success
That's
despite
right.
the life that you were involved.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Does make you wonder if you never got involved with that, what else you could have achieved then.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So from school, I went on to college for about the college I wanted to go to, because my friends were there, they wouldn't take me on because of my behaviour, even though my grades were not too bad. So from there, I went to a particular college in Leicester, which is something else now. I used to be Leicester College on Abbey Park campus, but it's changed now. So I used to go there. I went there for 3 months, carried on smoking weed, and I got kicked out after 3 months. And then from then on, I was, in and out of, I wouldn't say offending, but prevention of offending measures. So I had places like Apex, and all them kind of places. I was in and out of those for about 2 years, I think it was before I went back got to college. And while I was at college, obviously during that time in them 2 years, obviously we started selling more harder drugs. So that's when we started going on the cocaine.
Okay.
That's when we started selling ecstasy.
What made you change? What was it? Just the demand, or was it just you had access to it that you then moved?
It was accessibility.
Right, and
So
the profit margins were
much bigger, yeah. And the lifestyle came a bit later, I think it was. That came off after I came out of prison.
Right.
So I'll go into that afterwards. But,
That's fine.
Yeah, so the accessibility, we used to have, the young people now, they call it a trap house. We like a drugs flat. And we used to, do lots of fraud from there. We used to make the Basher SIM cards, sway up all the drugs, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go into too much detail or too many any explicit language or anything.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few of us involved. Some of the guys are quite smart, intelligent guys. They didn't get caught. Some of them been in prison a few times. Like the violence that came with it. And when we got accessibility to the harder drugs, for example, the cocaine, is a complete different group or demographics of people that we used to sell the drugs to. So at that time, I was only 16, 17 years old. But we were having people that in the late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, 40s, coming to see us for for the cocaine and stuff.
Right.
And then obviously I went to college about 17 years old. Did quite well at college, even though I was selling drugs throughout my whole college career, if you want to call it.
So what did you, just out of interest, would you then be studying in the evenings or studying in between, college and whatever else you are involved with?
I just study as I feel when I wanted to. So like I said, alhamdulillah, I was academically gifted. So when I was at college, I used to be I used to be high all the time, most of the time.
Wow. Nobody picked this up.
They did. Some of the teachers did suspect it, but because I wasn't disrespectful, I was quite well mannered. I was quite respectful.
Played the game.
Yeah, played the game. Yeah, so I lead like a kind of double life, and because I'd built that reputation over the years, and with the group of people that I used to be with, and I used to know, of coming from Highfields had a reputation as it is anyway. So
okay, so how at what point did it begin to disintegrate your life then?
So after college, I went to university out of town for for 1 year, and I started. So my intention at university was to sell drugs.
You went with that intention.
I went with the intention to sell drugs, obviously to get a degree at the end of it as well.
Yeah.
But the town that I went to is a big town, the biggest town, if not I'm not going to mention what it is, what town it is.
That's fine. Yeah.
So went there, and the game completely changed. As in the scale of drugs that I was selling completely changed. The contacts I was making completely changed. And it became a lot more risky. There's attempts made on my life. I've done things, I've hurt people. People have tried to hurt me. Other people have got hurt. I could have either ended up dead or killed someone else, or end up in prison for a lot longer.
Right.
But I enjoyed the lifestyle.
Despite that stress you were living with.
I love the adrenaline.
Okay.
And like I said, I was exposed to a whole different demographics of people from all over the country, and that respect and that status that you believe that you achieve, it's an addiction within itself.
Right.
So so like I said, some people, they're addicted to the lifestyle,
Yeah.
the adrenaline, the rush, all that kind of stuff. So and the money as well. The money was good. I was making about 20 grand a week,
Wow.
which is a lot of money. So
Of course, yeah.
but more money than sense at that time.
Yeah. Okay, and then you said that you, at some point, you ended up in prison.
Yeah. So the police did the operation on me for about 4 or 5 months.
This was while you were at university.
While at university, yeah. So they did the operation on me. Obviously, did a raid on a few of the flats that I had in London.
Right.
And I got caught with a few things I shouldn't have caught. Not only back then it was Class C, cannabis was Class C. I was only saying Class C at the time, cannabis, even though it's Class B right now. But I got caught with bulletproof vest, knuckle dusters, firearms accessories, all that kind of stuff. So alhamdulillah, luckily I never got sent away for as long as I was meant to go for. I was looking at maybe 8 or 9 years.
Right.
But I didn't get that long. I got quite a short period of time.
So was that time in jail, was that the turning point then for you?
It wasn't, no. So,
So even jail itself was not enough to stop you from that lifestyle?
So because I'd been caught at that time, I had a vendetta against the authorities, the police, anyone that I felt went against me. Obviously, not wipe them out, but sort them out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was, obviously I got a lot of time to think, and I thought, I need to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
So when I got out of prison a number of years later, just under 2 years later, obviously I got reintroduced to a friend that I used to know before I went away, and just started selling cocaine at the time.
Okay.
So I'd done a few months on tag, got back to university again because my father wanted me to go to university, and once I finished my tag, I jumped straight back into it. But this time, selling Class A drugs. And with the Class A drugs comes a lifestyle with nightlife and, a lot of other things.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was it then finally that made you, would you say you hit rock bottom?
So, rock bottom for me was, I think there's a lot of pressures from a lot of sides. So, for example, family pressures, not knowing how to cope.
What was the pressures from the families, the expectations?
Expectations, people not getting along.
Okay.
Then obviously I had my own business, and obviously it was COVID at that time as well, so a lot of pressure from COVID and the business, thinking whether the business is going to survive or not.
Right. Okay. And
obviously I got involved with some of the wrong people I wasn't good to do business with, even though they made out like they're trying to help me and stuff.
Yeah.
But I felt like they're trying to exploit me because I was in a vulnerable situation at that time.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking straight.
Okay, so what was rock bottom? Describe that for us then. Where, in terms of your health, your mental health?
So I lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I had a lot of very dark thoughts.
Would that be suicidal thoughts?
Some suicidal, but I thought to myself, you know what, I'm not going to go out by myself.
Right.
I'm going to take out a few people with me, a lot of people with me before I take myself out. Obviously, alhamdulillah, never came to action. I'm not sure I've done it or not.
Yeah. It just shows the state of mind.
Yeah,
Would you say your mental health was affected?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%.
So, what about physical health? You said you lost a lot of weight.
I lost a lot of weight. I wasn't looking after myself.
Yeah. And your mental health had obviously suffered.
Of course, yeah.
What about your family relationships?
Family relationships are broken down with my brother, my sister, my mother, and my father.
Wow.
They wouldn't talk to me as much. My brother stopped talking for a long time.
Right.
But my brother's actually one of the key people that helped me get through all this, along with some other brothers and obviously the Spinney team as well.
So, I mean, the reason I want to try and kind of put it in some context, you're talking about a young man who, from the age of 9, really, from what you described, when people are still on just playing in the parks,
yeah, of course, yeah.
You started your criminal career. You somehow managed to maintain some sort of educational career throughout of it. You then lived what can be described as the high life, where you were dealing with vast sums of money.
Yeah.
And all the trappings that came with that. I'm assuming you had all the things that you wanted to have which you didn't have as a child, clothes, and then the responsibility that came with that. But yet, despite having all of those things, you didn't find any happiness, and you were really at breaking point. Yeah. So it's really interesting, from an outsider listening in to you had everything you wanted, seemingly, but it didn't bring you the happiness that you thought you would, and instead it got you to the point where you were contemplating taking your own life.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I know you've touched on it a little bit. How did you go from that depth of darkness and despair to the brink of suicide, mental health breakdown, physical illness, to then turning your life around and pulling yourself out of it?
So first of all, as in culturally, religiously, and personally, I found it very hard to open up to people, and obviously the telltale signs were obviously clearly visible to a lot of the people, because a lot of the people, they had either gone through it themselves, but no one's ever heard of, for example, not even Turning Point or Spinney Hill at that time.
Right.
Even though Spinney Hill had been in operation for about 4 or 5 years, I think it was. So obviously I knew of Hafiz Afzal for quite a while.
So just for the listeners, Hafiz Afzal is one of the founders of the organisation.
Yeah. He's a legend in Highfields.
Alhamdulillah, very much so.
So yeah, a lot of people have got things to say about him, and he's helped a lot of people. He goes out his own way. He's very caring, very compassionate, non-judgmental, just like all other brothers at Spinney as well. But anyway, so obviously my business was suffering. I was suffering physically. I was suffering mentally. The telltale signs were visible to a lot of the people, my loved ones around me, and a lot of the people, they didn't know how to approach me. I didn't know how to approach them.
Yeah.
So I did try to access help myself. So I did start looking online before I went away. And what's happened is, how should I put it? When I was at the risk of losing my business and at the breaking point of relationship with my family and my friends, because obviously I did get approached by a few people, but I obviously had to cover it up because I had the shame and embarrassment of going through those kind of issues.
Yeah. So
it was my brother approached me.
Yeah.
And I just completely broke down to my brother.
Abdul, I'm just going to stop you there. Just had some messages coming in. Firstly, just from myself, just want to say, just appreciate your honesty.
Thank you.
It can't be easy, talking about it and being so honest. We've had some messages in just saying, salams, this is a great topic from this very brave man. Life was hard in the 80s and 90s. So just continuing with your kind of journey. So you then came into contact with Afzal and some of the brothers from Spinney Hill.
That's right, yeah.
How did they help you?
So the first thing was Hafiz Afzal's approach and the Spinney Hill team's approach. They were not judgmental, they were compassionate, they were caring, and they don't give up. That's the main thing. A lot of people, for example, their family will give up on them, their friends will give up on them.
Yeah.
Because they've had so many chances. And I wouldn't say it's the individual's fault itself, but it's the grip that the addiction got on them, whatever addiction it is.
Yeah.
Whether it's alcohol, drugs, gambling, pornography, whatever it might be, because addiction comes in many different forms. My addiction started from a young age, from that thrill of shoplifting, from the thrill of fighting, from the thrill of, just getting the thrill, living the fast life.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, I have just, very compassionate, very non-judgmental, very caring, very approachable. It's a confidential service.
Yeah, one of the things that Spinney Hill tries to do is to dehumanize the addicts, or to humanize the addicts.
That's right, yeah.
Because for a lot of people, even people who are in the caring profession, they look upon addicts as they're almost dehumanized, that their feelings don't matter, that their issues or concerns don't matter. And in some ways, they're in this predicament through choices that they've made.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Spinney Hill tries to do is to humanize that person, that, there may be an addiction, but the addiction is only part of this, and there's a person behind that. Did you feel that through the organization?
Yes, of course, definitely. They made me feel welcome. Like I said, they don't judge me. They saw me as for the person who I was. They gave me a glimmer of hope. So that everything will be okay as long as you put in the work, and obviously it'll take time. Yeah. And as long as you put in the effort, then you can make changes, but it has to come from within yourself. Yeah. The support will be there for you. Yeah. But you have to take them. So you can. The doors open, but you can't. they can't take the steps for you. You have to take the steps yourself.
So where are you now then in your life?
Alhamdulillah, you know what? I think I'm in a good place.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
So physically I feel good, mentally I feel good.
Yeah.
I've had a few, milestones in my life, life-changing milestones. I don't want to go specific into too much detail.
Yeah.
Like I'm a volunteer with Spinney Hill now. Try to help other people in my journey.
Yeah.
And just try to encourage and motivate people.
Yeah.
And in terms of Spinney Hill, what they've done for me as well.
Yeah. Would you say you're happy?
I am happy, yeah.
Yeah, mashallah.
I won't say I'm happy, I'm content.
Yeah, which is a very important distinction. I mean, you've come, your journey has been incredible from where you were to where where you started to where you ended up, and to where you are now, where, mashallah, you're healthy, you're mentally, you're content, like you said. Your family life is more stable. Have you reconciled with your family, your parents?
Yeah, I have, yeah. Both my parents, my brother, my sister.
Yeah. That must be so...
A lot of my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. And that's one of the things that the organization... these are what we would call maybe soft outcomes, where, obviously part of what we do in the organization is to support people to overcome their addictions. Yes. But, that family mediation, reconciling with parents, because we have a lot of parents that come to the organization asking for help, and every story is heartbreaking. To see a mother's tears, that this child that she brought into this world, that she had so much hope for, so much umeed that my son, my daughter would grow up. This is what they would become, and then to see them violent towards them, to see them stealing from them. And then when they come to the organization, giving them that hope, and then over a period of time, those changes that come, and then when that child then asks that parent for forgiveness, is something that which is kind of it's immeasurable.
Yes, of course,
really, so now you're involved with Spinney Hill.
Yeah.
One of the aims of the organization has always been where we have this rotating door where somebody comes in with a problem, with an addiction, they get better, they overcome the addiction, and then they give back to the new service users, because there's nothing more powerful than lived experience.
Yes, of course.
So tell me about some of the things that the organization delivers, the activities that they do. I know that, obviously we've moved into a new place. Yes. So what are the kind of hopes from there?
Okay, so the new place, it's an amazing place, really. They've got first, also, I love going to the gym, I love training. Yeah. They've got an on-site gym, multi-gym, curved treadmill, assault bike, free weights. They've got a computer desk area, so where people can obviously get support with finding jobs, employment, whether housing issues. They've got a small area for group therapies. They've also got a prayer area. They've got recreational activities such as table tennis, there's a pool table coming as well.
So one of the things that the Spinney Hill ethos is that to look at a person to look at the complete person, and what we believe is that person has three distinct component parts, which is the mind, the body, and the soul. Yeah. So in terms of the body, there's the physical activities, there's the gym like you mentioned, there's the running machine, etc. In terms of the mind, so there's counseling sessions that take place, one-to-one counseling, there's also psychotherapy, there's peer-led group support.
That's right,
and there's other therapies that are delivered to the service users, because one of the things that we found is that not all, but a lot of the service users, a lot of those who have addiction, have some sort of trauma that they're dealing with in the past. And there's a very strong link between childhood trauma and addiction. Yeah. And it's almost like the addiction is there to mask the pain.
That's right, yeah.
And unless we can unpick that and unlock that and deal with those locked away emotions, the addiction, even if they stop drinking or they stop taking drugs, that addiction will be replaced with something else in order to mask that pain. Yeah. And the final part and the most important part for us is the third part of the human being is the soul.
Yes.
And that's why, we use spirituality, we use the tenets of our faith, and we always encourage people who come onto the project to reconnect with their religion, to reconnect with their Lord, and that is the most powerful thing. So we have an emphasis on tasawwuf, dhikr. For those who want it, there's no compulsion. A lot of the brothers and sisters who come they they then want to start to learn how to pray again.
That's right,
We have some huffaz who forgot their Quran because of their addiction, and so they come to relearn their Quran. Some never went to madrasa, or if they did, they went for a short time, so they come to learn. Have you found? Have you witnessed some of these classes?
Yes, I have. So on Monday evening and I think Friday evening, we have like a spiritual session.
Yeah.
So an alim or Maulana, they'd come in, young brothers, and they just, they try to give that little bit of hope, that little bit of motivation, encouragement, to say that, everything's going to be okay. As long as you stick to your deen, you practice what you can, and you make the effort, everything will be okay. Like, for example, they've always come to give the example, a lot of the Sahaba at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they were alcoholics. And, when the verses of Quran came down, they didn't outlaw alcohol straight away, it came in stages. And if you think about it, as in, it makes sense. So even in this day and age, in the modern day, if a certain person is alcohol dependent, you don't make them stop drinking alcohol straight away. You have to, you can come off it in stages, otherwise it can be, dangerous. Yeah. So, there's a underlying thing behind that all as well.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of support. I mean, if there is a take-home message, if there is anybody listening who has an addiction, or if, you somebody in your family, a partner, a spouse, a child that you're worried about, then the first thing is that don't suffer in silence.
Yeah, that's right.
There's support out there, and one of our, the most important thing for us is confidentiality.
Yes, of course.
That, nothing that is ever, any information that we learn, if we know people, none of that information is ever shared with anybody else in the community without any permission. Yeah. One of the other things is that compared to other services that do similar work, Spinney Hill really, it's a one-to-one service. We try where possible. If we don't hear from somebody for a little while, we'll ring them up.
That's right, yeah.
We'll remind them about their appointments, and try to then engage them in positive activities as much as possible. Do you know from any personal experience how much of a problem this is amongst women?
I don't know exactly the exact figures or the research done, but from what I gather, is a lot of sisters are suffering. And as I was saying before, addiction doesn't only come in the form of drugs or alcohol. It could be social media, it could be pornography, it could be gambling, it could be anything. Yeah. So a lot of sisters, because we have had a lot of messages from sisters that are addicted to things like pornography. Yeah. And like I said, it seems apparent to myself, but when you go through, so I don't use social media that much, but I've seen the behaviours of a lot of sisters and brothers as well. As in, I'm not trying to put any difference between the brothers and sisters now, yeah, because they're all equal and in the eyes of Allah now, yeah. Yeah. Social media is a really big one. Yeah, yeah.
So there's definitely, we've had a lot of referrals from sisters. So there is a hidden issue, and we've just had a message in that, one of the sunnah, of our beloved Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is that he would never be judgmental, and he would never judge somebody, because nobody knows the journey that somebody's been on. It's very easy to look upon somebody who has this problem and say, well, they've brought this upon themselves. But we don't know what kind of trauma people might have gone through, what experiences they might have gone through that has led them to this. So, for example, we have a number of people who've come from abroad, in countries where they've witnessed war, they've witnessed people in their own families being killed. And to deal with that, one of the only things that they can do is to take drugs, because we can't even begin to imagine to see a loved one, being killed. So like the brother or sister who messaged in, we can never judge anybody.
Of course, yeah.
As an organization, like I mentioned at the outset, it's a voluntary organization. Yes. Everybody that gives it time, we only have one worker who's 0.6 part-time worker. Everybody else gives their time voluntarily. There's no monetary gain, and our long-term vision. So we've moved, like I said, from a living room to a room in somebody's office, to our own small premises, to a bigger premises, and I'll give the details of the premises and our contact number should anybody wish to contact us. But one of the things we need, obviously, is really people to give their time. There's so much talent, there's so much experience, there's so much expertise within our community, and to have that God-given gift, in whatever field, whether it's law or social services, whatever it is that we're doing, and then to utilize that for ourselves, to make our own nice nest and look after our family, which is great, but then not to give something back to the community is really something which is almost a betrayal of what Allah has given us. So not everybody can give lots and lots of time, but even half an hour a week, even an hour a week, even just to be available at the end of a phone call, just to be able to say, look, I've got this skill, I'm good at IT, I'm good at marketing, I'm good at whatever. I work full time, I've got this and this, but if you need me, here's my number, then by all means give me a ring. That would be a massive support for the organization, help it to develop, help it to grow, and help it to continue to help other people, because just there's not much data on drug use out there, because of the nature of the problem. It's hidden. People prefer to keep it in-house, try to resolve it within themselves, but speaking to other service users, and anecdotally, it's a huge problem which is underground, and if it's not dealt with, if it's not interrupted, then it's got the potential to really be an epidemic within our community. So one of the things that we also are looking to do, we've started to do, is the preventative work, which is rolling out the training sessions, firstly on the harms of drugs.
Yes, that's right.
In madrasas, in Islamic seminaries, Islamic schools, but also state schools, and also to deliver training sessions to parents. So the things that you mentioned, the things that they should be looking out for in terms of their own parenting skills, because the way we were parented, when we were young children, the world has moved on so much. You mentioned social media. There wasn't social media when you were growing up.
There wasn't, no.
And I'm older than you, so there definitely wasn't anything like that. So we as parents have to always be one step ahead of what our children are going through. Make sure that we're aware of the signs to look out for. And if, God forbid, we ever do become concerned, then we need to know where to go to gain that support. So just in terms of a few numbers, the new Spinney Hill Drug Alcohol Addiction Support Service, like Brother Abdullah mentioned, has now moved to 46 Chesterfield Road.
That's right.
Which is just one or two buildings away from CKI, Martial Arts Centre, and opposite Pack Foods.
That's right.
There's a building there. Our contact number is 0300 1240 945, and these numbers will be put on the website afterwards that people can access it. And our website is www.spinneyhill.org.uk. I'll just mention that one more time, www.spinneyhill.org.uk. So like I mentioned earlier, that is a confidential service. If you want to come at a time when nobody's there, we can arrange that as well. If somebody wants to just have some support over the phone, that's fine as well. We also do sessions for the spouses, the partners of those who are addicts, because they're the hidden victims in all of this. So there's groups. So if you want to access that, then by all means, you can access that as well. So Abdullah, I just want to first of all again thank you.
Thank you very much.
First, you for coming on, but also your honesty, and I'm sure that inshallah it'll be a massive help to so many people out there who are listening. If not today or tomorrow, somebody will come across somebody who's got a similar issue, and they'll think of you and think of the project, inshallah. So just thank you, and just also want to say thank you to Radio Ramazan for giving us the opportunity, and also to the listeners for their time in listening.